Thanks for having us today. First off, I just wanted to say the two other speakers that came ahead of us, some of the stuff that came out from those two was wonderful and absolutely accurate. We learned a lot of lessons along the way, which were echoed by those two previous speakers, and so you'll see some of that kind of bleed through in my presentation. Just to kind of lead everyone through here, how we got to where we're at. Falmouth Board of Selectmen tasked the Water Quality Management Committee to look at non-traditional ways to remove nitrogen. Over the last 12 years, the town has explored many different ways to deal with non-traditional alternatives and to select certain opportunities that could exist. We looked at shellfish because in addition to nutrient removal, there's other things going on there that can be beneficial. For instance, money into our revenue stream for our recreational and commercial shell fishery, water clarity, all the other things that kind of come along with that, job creations, and other economic benefits and environmental benefits. This was one of our earlier farms on. One of the things that we spoke about, or that it's been talked about today, is kind of looking at one specific species. We've looked at oysters, we looked at scallops, we looked at quahogs. We were starting to do some stuff with rib mussels. Here, the farm on the left and the two farms on the right, those are both oyster farms. The one in the middle, that's a quahog farm, and then the one at the top is a scallop farm. So we're growing everything right next to each other and trying to work all those animals to their greatest benefit for the town and for the folks in our community. Quick history, we started 2013 to 15 scaling up. We worked our way all the way through to the point that down on the bottom left, we had Shellfish Advisory Board got appointed. The town departments worked together with the committee. We worked together to permit a pilot project, which I'll go through in a few minutes here. We advertised that pilot project out. It was a 3-year pilot project. That project has gone out to private farmers to farm oysters in the town of Falmouth. So one of the things that we talked about was the town putting the oysters out in Falmouth. We do not put oysters out onto the commercial shell fishery anymore. We wanted to avoid the starts and fits and some of the things that both the speakers talked about, kind of dumping that price out, particularly in the fall. It's by no mistake that price dumps in the fall because a lot of the recreational and commercial fisheries open up in the fall. So a lot of the stuff that we were growing, we would be putting out a couple million oysters on the market, and that would depress the market. And we heard that from the industry, and we were very receptive to that. At this point, we're in the final kind of home stretch of where we're at, and we're going to be looking at doing full-scale implementation of a full-scale aquaculture plan for the town of Falmouth. As I spoke about, we had the Eel River Aquaculture project, the pilot project, and basically this was used to evaluate the feasibility of engaging commercial aquaculture contractors to grow oysters using high-density floating gear. These sites essentially are permitted by the town of Falmouth. They're located in places that have a number of different users in the estuary. There's a lot of boating traffic there. There's folks that are accessing Washburn Island on your left. There's folks that commercially shellfish there. So we had to really kind of thread that needle to really find that everyone's interests could be met. And we were able to make that happen. This is a visual that I like to use that shows how our systems work. The gray is kind of what the town's responsible for. The town owns the gear. The town permits the sites. The town then has a rental fee for the gear. So we rent out all the bags. We rent out floats. We rent out cooler space in the winter. We rent out upwellers, all the things that you need to get going. And then with those rental fees, that money goes into the revolving account, and we utilize that funding to provide for quahog seed, which then is put out in the estuaries and also harvested by commercial harvesters. So we're kind of doubling down on what we're doing. We're getting the private side dealing with the oysters, and then more of the commercial side and recreational side that's dealing with the quahogs and some other animals that we've been working with. As far as the contractors are concerned, they're kind of representative of the blue there. They're putting the oyster seed into the bags. They're growing the oyster seed from a couple weeks old from the hatchery all the way through until they're sold at the market. They're required to weigh everything in and everything out into their farms. And we'll kind of go through that in a few minutes here, what that looks like. For planning purposes, we're able to do about 130 kilograms of nitrogen per acre, and we were able to demonstrate that on our farms. We've actually exceeded that on a few of the farms, which you'll see in a slide later on. That's a reasonable number to accomplish, and all the farms have been able to get to that number. As far as the amount of shellfish that is, with adult shellfish, you're looking at about 225,000 oysters, adult oysters, to get that number. There have been no studies, however, done on the nitrogen. We have done no studies on the nitrogen removal of quahogs and scallops. We will be doing that as part of the final work that we're going to be doing. So here's kind of where we're at with it for the last 3 years. Under the demonstration project, there were 3 million oysters sold. The town had a revenue of $141,000. That has almost paid back that initial investment to build the gear. So everything from here forward on those 3 farms is all a win. A lot of the work that was done to build the bags, most of the work was done by volunteers, so it was free labor. We worked with the Barnstable County Sheriff's Department. We did inmate training programs. We were actually working inside the jail with female inmates, doing a bunch of work on that front as well. As far as kind of just going through this, you're looking at the total oysters sold, obviously for each year, the net weight increase. So, the farms were that the farm numbers that last year really did well as far as the net weight increase, and then the revenues. $51,000 last year. We're pretty steady at this point. These 3 growers sell the majority of their stuff to one specific buyer, which is something that, as we'll talk about later on, it's something that needs to be explored a little bit more, kind of how we set up those markets. A lot of this stuff actually makes it out of the state of Massachusetts. It does not remain here. The benefits, I think we all know these. It creates jobs, environmental impacts. The town has developed a model that shows that the resource can be successfully shared. And the community perception, which I think is a big piece, is that the town is really taking an active role in addressing all different ways to address nitrogen, not just the ones that are going to cost the town money. This project, again, after this year, that demonstration will not cost the town any money from here forward. Which is, somewhat goodwill to get a bigger need. We need sewering. I believe we need sewering. I would think a lot of people here would feel the same as I do. I do think it's great will, though, when I go to town meeting and I can stand up as a shellfish constable and say, listen, we have done everything we possibly can. And I also, not to kind of jump around a bit here, but, I don't want to make everyone think that, oysters are the magic bullet. When they work the best is when you have an area that is so affected that even with sewering, you need something else. In that case, it works well. And in cases where you have just a little bit to push it over the edge, those 2 pieces of the envelope are really the most effective pieces for utilization of oysters, in my opinion. By the numbers, so from 2014 to 2024, this is town-wide. This is all of our production. Again, we're not up near the numbers like Wellfleet or some of the other communities, Duxbury, but we did produce town-wide over that period 21 million oysters. The jobs created in that time period that we've been doing 25 jobs. Volunteer hours, and that includes inmate programs, volunteering, from members of the public, that had a value of $250,000, and yeah, I mean it's slide kind of speaks for itself. Quick photo of a bunch of the seed that we produce. Again, this stuff goes out just for recreational harvest only. Again, I just want to make that clear. We are not putting out onto the market to compete with the wild market. We are allowing wild growers to do that task. Last slide here. The town meeting this fall, we're looking at a $400,000 town meeting article to deal with the DEIR and engineering. By all accounts, that should pass through. We will, in a year from now, be looking for a $4 million funding piece. Again, one of the pieces that were proposed by my two previous speakers were addressing dealing with the business end of it, and we have started collaboration with the MIT Sloan School of Management. Their MBA students find this to be a pretty attractive program and likely will be linking up with us to address these issues. Really kind of cutting edge MBA program students who are going to be addressing this issue that was brought up today. Partnering again with the Sheriff's Department, and we're going to have to bump up our volunteer corps. I will now have Tom do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, right. I feel like Chuck's put this great big giant dog out in front of you, and I'm the little tail wagging at the end of it. But I want to put some numbers out in front of people, mostly to get you talking and thinking about them, and it actually addresses to a couple of the questions that were raised here. This is the average from the Eel River project over the 3 years. 2020 was a crash, everybody knows that. You saw Josh's figure. There was no market for the half-shell oysters because the restaurants were closed. The oysters in that project per acre extracted 106 kilograms of nitrogen, and that was about 3% of Falmouth's allocation for Eel River. Now, we share that allocation for Wacoit Bay with both Sandwich and Mashpee, but our fraction of it. And the neat thing here is that it would only take 30 acres of oysters. It would only take 30 acres of oysters here to meet that entire allocation, Falmouth's allocation for the estuary. But what I really want you to be thinking about is that 106 kilograms represents, according to the Cape Cod Commission's model, the amount of nitrogen that 24 standard issue Cape Cod households, whatever they are, whatever they look like, release into the groundwater in a year through septic systems. And as Mike already alluded, capturing the nitrogen after it's already gotten into the estuary is not a great idea, right? It's like you're putting a Band-Aid on someone that's being stabbed again and again and again, right? You want to go upstream somewhere and intercept the nitrogen. So I've presented some alternatives here where you could go upstream to the households and intercept that nitrogen, and think about what the dollar value of that might be. The simplest thing I put up there was for urine diversion, which has been, no pun intended, a hot topic in Falmouth in particular lately. And a real simple approach is to buy something called a cubie, which is a plastic tub with a funnel on top, which is very basic. You can get one of those for $80. Now there's a lot of simpler approaches too you could use, but it's one. And then also you can take the urine and use it in what's called pea cycling, use it to fertilize plants at home with the nitrogen and phosphorus. But if you multiply that by the 23.7, you end up with $1,900, right? That it would cost otherwise. How much time? I'll be really quick now. I'll shorten these numbers up. On the other hand, another alternative right now is septic systems, and you saw from earlier talks, septic systems now are ranging from $22,000 to $45,000 plus. That figure comes in at $830,000. If we look at putting sewers in, which of course are more efficient, more effective, I should say, at capturing nitrogen than the IAs are. We completed a project in Falmouth a couple of years ago, Little Pond project, 1,300 houses, $20,000 a house. It comes in at $500,000. Now that's just the economic equivalent of 1 acre of oysters. Now, if we look at projected projects in Falmouth, the new ones that are still in planning stage, and these numbers are really rough. Estimates right now are $60 to $80 million for 1,800 houses. You get $750,000 up to just over $1 million. Now Mashpee is in the midst of a much more complex project, building a brand new treatment system. So the cost is quite a bit higher. It's $162 million dollars for 1,700 houses. That's at a cost of $94,000. $94,000 per resident. And if you multiply that out by the 24 houses I'm talking about up here, you come in at about $2.25 million. Right here in Barnstable, they've started a 30-year project to sewer 12,000 houses for $1.4 billion with a B dollars. And that works out to a cost per household of $117,000. Now, a couple of issues that were raised, I promise I'll be really quick, I'm out of time. Ron, you raised the issue of getting the towns to pay for this. If I was an oyster grower, I'd be going to a local town and saying, God, look what this is worth. What if you have to pay to add sewer somewhere? Suddenly it's very expensive. Your point before, Josh, here's your built-in inflation factor right here. 10 years, that covers a 10-year span of people putting in sewers, a tremendous increase in cost. And I'll stop there and we're out of. We have time for one or two questions. Yeah, I don't have the answers. I just want to get people thinking about these numbers. They're pretty amazing. Yes, Mike.
If you, let's say, offer some type of nitrogen credit to growers,
yeah,
right? And that's what you kind of just brought up.
Yeah.
How do you sort of envision kind of equalizing or leveling the playing field there if one municipality is, say, offering a nitrogen credit to grow oysters and their cost of production now is like 12 cents an oyster and they don't care, they can unload them at like 25 cents, they're still making a profit with their credit, then how does that impact other growers in the state that don't take Chatham or something, they're sewering, they don't need to give a nitrogen credit?
Yeah, they have a bad luck to be in Chatham, but I don't have a simple answer to your question.
Sure, I'm just bringing it up.
But suppose Falmouth has a no net increase in nitrogen loading of the groundwater, right? Suppose a developer comes in and wants to build a 30-unit apartment building. He goes to the local shellfisherman and says, I'll pay you X for your nitrogen credits because I can turn around to the town and show them there's no net gain. It's a wash. I'm just completely speculating on the economics. I have no idea how it might work out. That occurs to me when you talk about the nitrogen credit. And it is a problem. Massachusetts is the only state that has local shellfish regulations. I've researched this extensively when we were setting these projects up.
It's not true.
They got just say one.
Oh, Maine does? Oh, okay, I missed that somehow.
One other piece real quick. In Falmouth, we only have, at this point, I believe it's 7 or 8 aquaculture growers. We're a little late to the game. How many growers are there in Wellfleet?
180.
So we hope to capitalize a little bit on that market.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at. And we also see some other benefits to the town. And I certainly am sympathetic that kind of every town has a different constable, if there's, 15 towns, they're looking at it 16 different ways, and I get that. And I just want to say that's what's good for our town. I've always been a big advocate, might not work for other communities, but I think what's important is that I have to listen to the growers in other communities, because I think we all have a responsibility to protect the market as a whole, or everything's going to fail. So,
and just to qualify, that's 180 growers, but they share licenses too. So you can
yeah.
have 4 people on one grant
Right, yeah.
listed to it. They're all technically their own license holder, but it's not exactly 180 separate funds.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised there for a minute.
And then there was another question.
Can you speculate with the diverse number of watersheds that are in Falmouth?
Right.
Are you speculating that some of these watersheds, if you put together shellfish aquaculture with urine diversion, that you would need in some of these watersheds to consider expensive sewage systems?
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but the need for some of our watersheds is not a big number. Other watersheds need a lot of help. We have Great Pond and Wacoit Bay are the 2 800-pound gorillas in our water management plans, but we have some smaller systems that possibly it could work. I just honestly don't know. I will tell you, Chuck didn't emphasize this, But over those 3 years that I averaged up there, that's a 30% increase from the first. Each year was better. So a couple of things happened. The environmental conditions were great, but also I think the 3 contracted growers that we had were getting better at what they were doing. Also, I think. I mean, Mike will tell you that you learn every year. You learn something, right? It's stuff you wish you forget.
Possible. You're raising a specter. It's possible. For some of the watersheds.
Right, but they would have to be watersheds that didn't have a tremendous nitrogen load. You'd have to start small, I think. Any other? That's it. We're out of time, right? All right. Thank you.